So here are the scanning results showing an interconnected system of passageways and chambers. And remember from the beginning of the video, the alignments of this labyrinth structure. This may be far older than anything we can understand, still containing untold secrets from our extremely ancient past, predating the construction of the Nile River pyramids, possibly the greatest mystery and secrets of prehistoric Egyptian history. So just remember this image when you are watching today's footage. And I can tell you that it is a surreal experience to walk around the ground here in Hawara, knowing all of this is still buried below your feet. Hope you enjoy.
All right, everyone. Now, the absolutely immense field that you see in front of me may not appear to be much on the surface, but this entire area, surrounded by the palm trees here, all the way in the back there, continuing around here, is the Labyrinth of Hawara.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the land of Kem. I'm your host and the author. My name is Jeffrey Drum. Thank you all so much for joining me again.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Now, for those of you that pay attention to the background, yes, we are now home in Egypt. And in today's episode, an exclusive investigation of two of the most mysterious sites in Egypt, the Labyrinth of Hawara and the Lost Pyramid. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. I think that's it for today's intro. So without further ado, let's get right to it. All right, everyone, here we go with tonight's episode.
So to begin, let me say that the structures of the Fayum Oasis are extremely ancient, and I truly believe that they predate the construction of the pyramids along the western bank of the Nile River, as proposed in my explanation of the Pyramid of Maidum being a predecessor to the Red Pyramid in Dahshur. Now, let me show you this. Here at the top left, you can see a structure called Qasr el Saga, or the Palace of Gold, recently presented on the members only channel. And here on the bottom right, you can see the Labyrinth of Hawara and the result of the laser scanning project that I will get to at the end of the episode. And in this brief passage here, stating, other sites in the Fayum are more difficult to explain in terms of their alignment. Medinet Madi, otherwise known as the City of the Past, is not aligned in known geographical or astronomical directions. However, its minor axis would have aligned with minor lunar standstills relative to the Hudson Bay Pole, the hypothesized location of the North Pole during the North American Ice Age, 20,000 to 45,000 years ago. The alignment of its major axis would have been in the direction of the Greenland Pole, another proposed location of the North Pole even further back in time, 75,000 to 130,000 years ago. Subsurface features at Hawara, referring to the underground labyrinth, which are not aligned with the Pyramid of Amenemhat III, are also oriented in the direction of the Greenland Pole. Based on the application of Hapgood's theory of crustal displacement theory, these alignments may be the fingerprint of at least two prehistoric civilizations in the Fayum Oasis over the past 100,000 years or so. And ladies and gentlemen, in today's Sunday site visit, you will get to see up close in person evidence of this overwhelmingly sophisticated ancient civilization, beginning with the Pyramid of El Lahun, which you can see here in a digital 3D recreation by R.F. Morgan, showing the enclosure or reservoir wall surrounding the structure. The Queen's or satellite pyramid here, a series of several other structures here on the north side, and here on the south, the underground passage leading into the primary chamber located here. Now, on to the construction. The pyramids of El Lahun and Hawara are similar in that they both share a combination of limestone and mud brick utilized in the pyramid core, a technique that would later be implemented within the Black Pyramid in Dahshur. As you can see here, in two diagrams showing the core of the pyramid of El Lahun, with the limestone shown here in white and the mud brick here in gray, which again is compared to the construction of the Black Pyramid here on the right, with the pyramid of El Lahun at the top, and the Black Pyramid casing stones over mud brick here on the bottom right. And here are some pictures from my 2021 research expedition showing these limestone core elements still protruding from the mud brick body of the pyramid here on the left. And yes, this structure was once completely cased in finished limestone, making it a complete tetrahedral pyramid, as you can see here on the right, some of the casing stones still remaining around the outside of the structure. But almost nothing is left of that pyramid shape today. And during my 2021 research expedition, we walked the perimeter of the structure inside of the enclosure, and I discovered several areas of bedrock that were highly concentrated with iron oxide. As you can see here, with these huge chunks of reddish-orange limestone and some extremely eroded looking bedrock back here. But I also discovered deposits of what appeared to be almost metallic iron, like this one here, which looked and felt exactly like a melted lump of iron embedded into the ground. And I found more of this at the Pyramid of Hawara, as you will see in just a moment. Now, in my recent expedition to the Fayum Oasis a few weeks ago, my second time visiting this area, I finally got some footage from inside of the underground passage and chamber system that you can see here. And another interesting detail regarding the pyramid of the Fayum Oasis is that they are all tapped into the subterranean water table below the structure, with a system of well shafts that you can see here, and another 3D recreation by Keith Hamilton, an indication that they were intentionally and functionally connected with the water entering these systems. And here is another 3D recreation from Hamilton showing the primary chamber, the configuration of which is very reminiscent to the primary chamber of the final Giza pyramid that I showed in last week's Sunday site visit, with a vacant cavity above the red granite chamber that has a rounded semicircular upper vault that you can see here. And here is a diagram showing the final Giza pyramid semicircular rounded upper vault. And I believe this connection in configuration is also communicating a similarity in their function. Now, inside the pyramid of El Lahun's primary chamber lies one of the most spectacular in situ artifacts that I have ever seen depicted here in this image, which unfortunately was not drawn to scale. However, I will note here that the width of this container is approximately 97 inches, which has a strange connection to the measurements at Stonehenge, with the inner sarsen ring having a diameter of approximately 97 feet. Now, even according to Petrie, it is doubtful that this exceptionally crafted container was ever intended for a burial, as you can see quoted here. From a quote by Petrie, strange to say, there is not a trace of a coffin or a lid to the quote-unquote sarcophagus. And indeed, as this chamber is not under the middle of the pyramid, it may be questioned whether the real interment is not yet to be reached by some other passage. And up here at the top is a drawing of an offering table that was discovered at the site that appears very similar to the ceremonial magic tablet that I found in the Cairo Museum. So I'll put in a clip of that artifact now, and then we'll take a journey inside the pyramid of El Lahoun. And at this point, I will say that the primary chamber of El Lahoun is quite unique in comparison with the other chambers within the Egyptian pyramids, where the temperature inside of them is quite cool. But inside the red granite chamber of El Lahoun, it is extremely hot and humid. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is just part one of today's Sunday site visit. There's more.
All right, everyone, we are here today at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo and just happened to stumble across this quote-unquote offering table. And you can see here, this is a small-scale inscription of the large component here. So this is your instruction manual for the chemistry. These are little mixing bowls here. There's one here. And I would say that this is essentially quote-unquote your magic spell that is inscribed around the outside of this alabaster piece. So for any of you that are familiar with ceremonial magic, sigils, and all of these sort of things, this speaks to me as the function of this particular device as preparation of your sacred ritual chemicals. All right, everyone, welcome back to part two of our expedition to investigate the pyramids of the Fayum Oasis. We are now here at the pyramid of El Lahoun. And I guess we're gonna get right to it and descend into the internal components of the structure. And this is my second time, and there's some super deep pits that go all around the structure, and we'll see the terminations of these down inside the structure. Here you can see the stairway, and we're going to do a time lapse because there's a rather long corridor that leads into the primary chamber, in which is one of the most spectacular in situ artifacts that I have seen ever in my expeditions across Egypt. So here we go, inside the pyramid of El Lahoun. All right, now here we are in. All right, quick battery change, and we're back in business. So this is all restoration work, and we're gonna go here through this tunnel system. So there's a tunnel system that runs around, it goes back around here, and it comes out in this direction. So we're gonna go, Hannah? Yes. I want to show you the tunnel system first. That leads back into the primary chamber. So there's this tunnel system, bunch of bats in here. Oh.
They're cute.
All right. And some supports back in here.
Okay.
No, ahead.
No problem. بس مصرية ترى.
This tunnel will lead us back to the other side of the primary chamber. Here, Iowa. It's granite. Okay. So this is it, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to cross through this threshold here. You can see the red granite. And this is it right here. So we are now inside. So let me give you some orientation. We just went through this tunnel system here, which, look at that, brought us through this opening here where Lex is, and this is just an ancillary side chamber over here. All right, and the primary objective for coming down in here is twofold. First, so this is a red granite interior chamber, which, if any of you have been following the channel, is very reminiscent to the red granite chamber inside the Pyramid of Menkaura, which also has the arched semicircular vaulted ceiling. This is quite different than what we see in the tiered vaulted systems of the Red Pyramid, and as we just saw, that was being executed inside of the Pyramid of Maidum. And then this, ladies and gentlemen, is by far the most spectacular in situ artifact of ancient stone masonry that I have seen in Egypt. There is absolutely nothing that I have seen that equals the craftsmanship of what you see here. I mean, this thing is just, but even to the naked eye, you can see that's not a precise 90-degree angle. It's pretty damn close, but it's not exact. Here you can see what looks to be like a damaged piece inside, you can see this circle piece right here, this patch right here. Is spectacular. And I would definitely say that the craftsmanship of this piece of stone vastly surpasses that of what we see in the Serapeum. There you go. This thing is just badass. And I'll put in a diagram that shows all the measurements of the container at the beginning of the episode, so you can familiarize yourself with the geometry. More specifically, so you can see here that the container is sitting flat on the ground, but it's higher on this end, and it contains some pretty sophisticated math and geometry that was incorporated in the design of this container. And this is by far my favorite piece of stonework. All right. So now we will ascend back to the surface and continue on to destination number 3. And now, back to the surface. All right, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the video. And if you want to help support the channel, you can pick up a copy of the book and grab some merch at thelandofchem.com. The second edition Egyptian blue version is now back in stock. Same text as the first edition, just a new color design and a brand new merch drop. Inazuma Kagaku, lightning, chemistry. Absolutely gorgeous kanji calligraphy designed by my Japanese tattoo artist Shin at Funky Guns in Kobe, and all of your favorites, including stickers. Links to everything in the video description below. Thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video.
All right, now on to the pyramid and labyrinth of Hawara, which you can see here. And a 3D recreation of the internal chamber system by Keith Hamilton here. And once again, this is a structure that features a system of well shafts and a well chamber, which indicate that it was intentionally connected to the subterranean water table. Here is a side-on view of the central chamber, above which you can see the mud brick vault. And here you can see both the well chamber in pink and the well shafts in yellow. Now, even during the original excavations in 1898, the water level still rose up inside of this chamber system, as you can see here and here, depicting the water level in 1898. But more recently, due to expansion and flooding of the nearby canal, the water levels inside of this pyramid have risen up even further. As you can see here, the water level in 1898 at the top, compared to the water level in 2013 down here at the bottom. So now, this inner chamber system is completely underwater, but it appears that this flooding of the internal components may have been intentional, as related to how the structure once functioned, again indicated by these well shafts tapping into the subterranean water table. Now, moving on to the labyrinth, which you can see here, occupies an immense area on the south side of the pyramid on both sides of the river that still runs to the west of the Pyramid of Hawara. This was an underground structure, the magnitude of which is beyond comprehension, with multiple different levels and possibly thousands of chambers. And here are the two areas that were scanned during the 2008 Mataha expedition to Hawara, where they finally revealed what now lays completely buried below the sand. Now, here's a cool graphic showing this labyrinth structure. But this entire area was a subterranean structure built underground. And in the next image, I'm standing right about here, about to cross over this little bridge so that we could access the western side of the labyrinth. This picture, coming from my 2021 research expedition and looking quite jacked at the time, rocking the OG Land of Chem second degree t-shirt with the ammonia molecule red pyramid logo that I personally designed, still available at thelandofchem.com. And here is a recent picture from our journey to Hawara, where you can see the remains of the temple threshold on the western bank of the river. And again here from the other side of the water. And this should give you some impression of what is still buried underneath all of this sand. It was indeed a colossal, megalithic structure and one of the greatest secrets and mysteries of ancient Egypt. Now, while I was exploring this area in 2021, I discovered more of these. What appeared to be almost like bars of metallic iron running through the bedrock, just like I showed before at the Pyramid of El Lahun. These bars felt like iron metal that had somehow been melted and fused into the rock, quite different than the iron oxide deposits that I've shown on the Giza Plateau. And last but not least, on to the laser scanning of the labyrinth. So here on the left is an image showing what was discovered during the Mataha 2008 scanning project. And in a minute, I'll show another phenomenal graphic so you can see the complexity of this underground structure depicted here on the right from the original exploration of the site by Petrie. However, he only excavated the Roman temple ruins that were directly below the surface of the sand, and they never penetrated the immense slab of stone that was really the roof of a much older, much deeper labyrinth structure. And I will quote here from the paper released by the Mataha Project. First, since Herodotus visited the legendary Labyrinth of Egypt 2,500 years ago, the building disappeared in the midst of time. After millennia of desert winds, the tip of its remains was finally found back by the famous archaeologist Flinders Petrie in 1889. Petrie interpreted the enormous artificial stone plateau he discovered at Hawara as the foundation of the labyrinth, and concluded that the building itself was totally demolished as a stone quarry in the Ptolemaic period. The mission of the Mataha expedition was, besides preservation, to question this theory. On account, the foundation impenetrated by early expeditions could be the roof of the labyrinth, described by Strabo as a great plain of stone. With the realization of a professional geoarchaeological survey and quote-unquote watched with a scientific qualified team under the quote-unquote foundation of Petrie, believed today by many people to contain all knowledge of ancient Egypt. So don't think I didn't notice the phrase here, enormous artificial stone plateau, that was used by Petrie to describe this massive slab of stone. And what Petrie thought was the foundation of the temple was really only the roof. As you can see here from the scan results, this is the ground surface of the sand at the top. Directly below the sand are the ruins of the Roman temple that were excavated by Petrie. This dotted line here represents the water table, and in blue, you can see this gargantuan slab of stone that Petrie thought was the foundation of the structure. But the scanning revealed this in yellow. The labyrinth itself that is still completely buried, and this blue stone slab that has never been broken through is just the roof of the structure. But that's not all, ladies and gentlemen. Take a look at this. So here are the scanning results showing an interconnected system of passageways and chambers. And remember from the beginning of the video, the alignments of this labyrinth structure. This may be far older than anything we can understand, still containing untold secrets from our extremely ancient past, predating the construction of the Nile River pyramids, possibly the greatest mystery and secrets of prehistoric Egyptian history. So just remember this image when you are watching today's footage. And I can tell you that it is a surreal experience to walk around the ground here in Hawara, knowing all of this is still buried below your feet. Hope you enjoy.
All right, everyone. Now, the absolutely immense field that you see in front of me may not appear to be much on the surface, but this entire area, surrounded by the palm trees here, all the way in the back there, continuing around here, is the Labyrinth of Hawara, an absolutely immense, now underground structure. Multiple levels, possibly up to 3,000 chambers, as described by the Greek historian Herodotus. And I don't know if you can pick it up on camera, but all of these little mounds are little excavations into the first level of the structure. And to date, there still has not been a full excavation of this labyrinth structure here at the Pyramid of Hawara, which you can now see in front of me. So This is a mud brick pyramid attributed to Amenhotep III, who was also responsible for the construction of the Black Pyramid in Dahshur. And as we were walking around the exterior here, I mean, there's fragments of quartzite, red granite, calcite crystal, dolerite, all sorts of miscellaneous geology that was utilized in the construction of this entire site. And we're going to take a walk around to this side to investigate the opening into the chamber system of the pyramid. All right, so here's another small little display of some of the geology. So we have quartzite, red granite, fine white limestone, and this is a piece of the mud brick. And the first time I picked this stuff up, I was absolutely shocked at how dense and heavy the material is. One of those bricks that you can see up there probably weighs close to 10 kilos, which in US is about 22 pounds. They're extremely heavy. And the last time that I was here, the gate was completely closed, and we didn't even get a chance to walk down inside of here. So the mud brick exterior might not look like much. Again, so here's an example of one of these mud bricks, and I mean, so I can't pick that thing up with one hand. And you can see the block right here. I would have to get two hands. I'm also trying to film and hold the GoPro and a cigar at the same time. But those things are super dense and extremely heavy. All right, there's a piece of red granite. And we're going to descend as far as possible down into the passage, which will not be very far, because as we get down to the bottom of this thing here, you can see it is completely filled with mud and water. The interior components of this structure are completely inundated. So I'll put in some diagrams so we can take a look at the interior components of the structure. Some extremely fascinating details about the construction of these inner chambers. And I will say, shout out to my wife, Alexa, from Ancient Odysseys, who's right here looking absolutely beautiful as always. And she pointed out that I hesitate to call these stairs because they aren't intended as stairs. They're a locking ratchet mechanism, similar to what we see at the Lost Pyramid in Dahshur. So unfortunately, there's not much we can see on the inside of this pyramid, but I want to take you for a quick walk around the labyrinth so you can see some of the geology and what remains of what was once possibly one of the most exquisite structures ever constructed here in Egypt. All right, so we just came out of the opening over there. And we're going to take a quick walk so I can show you the remains of some geological fragments that are still down here. Again, I want to put in some, we'll get up here to a high point so you can see the whole scope of this labyrinth temple, because this is just one side of the river over here. This absolutely immense field. And the structure carries over onto the other side of the river. I bet you didn't expect to see this over here. And as you can see here on the other side, there's some huge limestone blocks of a temple here on the other side. And the structure continues. So down here are the remains of some pretty immense fragments of red granite. There's also a bunch of quartzite scattered about here, but these are huge pieces of red granite that were pillars. She is absolutely dying to just go dig through all these holes and and here you can get a better view of the huge limestone blocks that were part of another opening into the Labyrinth temple complex here on the other side of the river. So just remember, when you see this whole area, there is a multi-level underground structure, a labyrinth, a huge maze temple complex that is buried underneath all of this sand. So multiple levels. All right, everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video, and please remember to subscribe to our 3 other channels: my wife Alexa's channel, Archeo Alchemy, our mutual international travel and culinary adventure channel, Let's Go with Lex and G, and the best channel on YouTube, Egyptian Trash Cats. For all you cat lovers out there. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video.
And the site that I will be discussing today is located here, just south of the red and bent pyramids of Dahshur. And you can see the red pyramid here, the bent pyramid here, and the black pyramid here. And I always notice that on Google Maps, the bent pyramid is also labeled as Pyramid Blanca, which means the white pyramid. So we have the black, the white, and the red. And although these are modern names, I do believe that this may have been adapted from the original nomenclature used to describe their function. As some of you that may have been following my work from the very beginning may recall that the black, the white, and the red are the colors of the 3 stages of alchemical transformation described by medieval alchemists, used to indicate different stages of a chemical reaction process. We have the black or the nigredo, the white or the albedo, and the red or the rubedo, which is exactly what was occurring within each one of these colossal structures. And here are the fragmented remains of the quote-unquote lost pyramid. And here, just to the north, a very unusual adjacent mud brick structure, both perched on the precipice of this immense depression to the west that you will see in just a moment. Now, this is what the structure looked like prior to the modern excavation in 2017. And that's right, ladies and gentlemen, this completely forgotten site was just recently, quote unquote, discovered and investigated for the first time only 6 years ago. And you can see here the eastern shaft, a huge change in configuration from almost every other site that has a shaft on the northern side of the pyramid. This one coming in from the east with some step-like features here that I will explain shortly. And you can see at this point, this area here with the 2 conduits and the entire southern half of the structure is still covered in sand and rubble. And looking here from a vantage point on the northern side, the southern and western sides of the site are still covered with sand and rubble prior to the excavation. And this picture here was taken midway through the excavation. And you can now see that the sand is fully removed, exposing the rest of this dual conduit system here, this trough on the eastern side of the primary chamber, and this cavity here leading toward the primary chamber. And then they discovered this massive piece of red granite laying atop an unopened quote-unquote burial chamber. This image coming from the Smithsonian Channel that documented this entire excavation and the live opening of this quote-unquote burial chamber that was supposed to be the first unopened pyramid tomb in which they would find a pharaonic burial. So at this point, you may be asking yourself, how did they lift this massive piece of stone to get inside of this chamber? Surely they must have used sophisticated modern lifting equipment and powerful cranes to raise this block of red granite, right? Nope. This is how they did it, with an A-frame and a compound pulley system. This is the secret of ancient lifting technology, ladies and gentlemen. No lost ancient high technology required, just the knowledge of physics and the magic of a compound pulley system. And with this simple setup, they were able to easily lift this huge piece of granite to open this sealed chamber and access the inside. And just guess how many people it took to lift this piece of stone. One man operating the compound pulley system was able to raise this piece of granite. This is how it was done today, and this is how it was done in the ancient times. Yes, this ancient civilization had machines and equipment, but they were simple machines designed with basic physics. Even the operation of the Egyptian pyramids, as I have described, in the production of chemicals, works on these exact same principles. Very simple physics and basic chemistry. But the results of applying this knowledge are absolutely miraculous. And I'll put a link to the 4-minute video from the Smithsonian Channel in the video description below, so you can see one guy lifting this piece of stone and the extremely disappointed look on the faces of the excavation team when they opened this chamber and found what they describe as evidence of quote-unquote ancient tomb raiding. So as always, once no burial or treasure was found, the excavations were stopped and the site was completely abandoned and forgotten until now. Now, here is a picture of the perplexing mud brick structure adjacent to the Lost Pyramid site on the northern side. And it is different than most that I've seen around Egypt, as the edges of this structure are curved. giving it a very unusual shape. And on the back side of this structure, there's a heap of sand and mud brick rubble and a conduit leading out toward the depression that you can see here. And this is the lost pyramid site over here and the termination of this mud brick conduit, dumping out over the edge into this colossal pit. And here is the eastern shaft of the lost pyramid itself. And these cutouts originally held metal clamps that were used to join these blocks together, so that were not only mortared together, but were also secured internally using this metal clamp system, which of course, all of these have now been removed. And here, looking down into the eastern shaft that has these step-like features that we saw in the original excavation photos that are now covered back in sand. And these are not steps. They are only a few inches deep and very, very small. Ladies and gentlemen, these are a ratchet locking mechanism for the eastern pump. So as the pump slid down the shaft, it locked into place with each step, ensuring that it would not be forced back up the shaft, locking and containing the internal pressure within the structure. And another very unusual point about the configuration of this pyramid site is that the eastern shaft does not lead directly to the quote-unquote burial chamber. If this was a burial, the entrance would lead to the main chamber so that you could bring your body directly into its final resting place. However, it stops here at what appears to be a dead end. And remember, this subterranean area here was originally covered with a pyramid or at least a mastaba of some sort. So once you get to the bottom of this shaft, how do you get to the primary chamber? You can't. This is a blatant example of the function of this structure that is in direct conflict with the conventional interpretation. So this is the area here that I was just referring to at the bottom of the pump shaft. It is a completely dead end. And all of this area here was originally covered by a structure above it. So there is no way to get from here over to the primary chamber located over here. But you will notice that there are some conduits leading up the side that are lined in cement, an indication that they originally housed some metal piping like we just saw at the Pyramid of Sahura in episode 80. So people can't access or move around inside of this structure, but fluids absolutely can. And there is evidence of a pit down here at the bottom of the eastern pump shaft and a component that ran along this red granite housing here into this cavity that I will be presenting in a later episode. And here is another angle showing all of the features in this area. The eastern pump shaft with the locking ratchet mechanism leading down here. A massive piece of red granite. The pit leading down here, which is in the exact same location as the other water inlet pits that I have discovered in the Red Pyramid, the Pyramid of Winis, the Pyramid of Teti, and most recently in the final Pyramid of Giza that I just showed in the last Sunday site visit. All in the exact same location at the bottom of the pump shaft, and they most likely all have the same function, to start filling the system with water. And then there's this component here, this red granite housing leading into this cavity, and this dual conduit system here, and this unusual hole in the center right here. Over here, more internal metal clamps, which are found all over the site. Next up, an image looking into the primary chamber with this huge lifted piece of red granite that was raised to open this chamber. And you can see here that this piece of red granite is now seated on some wooden railroad ties holding it up. This lower section of the chamber was excavated from a single piece of red granite. This upper is a separate piece, and this piece at the back of the chamber is red quartzite, which you can see here from the outside. So these two pieces are red granite, and this one is red quartzite, the same piece as we just saw at the back of the internal chamber. Here is a very unusual tubular drill hole. However, this hole does not go straight down. It curves down into the stone, which is extremely interesting. And here, more metal clamps. And there are two troughs on each side of the primary chamber. One here on the eastern side and one here on the western side. This is the trough on the eastern side, and it appears to have been connected into the dual conduit system. So here's an image prior to the excavation showing the dual conduits running in this direction. And here is that eastern trough, still completely filled with sand. So there is definitely a functional connection between these two components of the pyramid system. And the western trough here. And there is a pit at the end of each trough that leads down into a cavity surrounding the primary chamber. And more metal clamps here. And the placement of these clamps are indications to me of areas that needed the most reinforcement to contain the internal pressure of the system. Some areas having single clamps, and the area near this trough and pit system having a dual clamp. And here is the immense depression, maybe 20 feet away from the pyramid site, which has connections not only to floods, which would have brought water directly up to the pyramid system, but also quarrying and mining. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, that these pyramids and ancient mining and metallurgy go hand in hand. So it is no surprise to me that we find a mud brick structure that could have been a smelting site and a reactor that could have been producing chemicals that were utilized in the mining and extraction process directly next to this immense source of raw materials. So this is one of the most spectacular and perplexing sites in Egypt that is absolutely teeming with indications of function. And you can see here the stunning view looking north toward the ancient chemical manufacturing plants of the Bent Pyramid, the Red Pyramid, and the Black Pyramids of Dahshur.
All right, everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video, and please remember to subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube if you're interested in the physics and chemistry technology of a lost civilization and the function of the Egyptian pyramids and other ancient structures from across the world. Thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video.
Now, in the remainder of this episode, we are going to do a comparison of some research from Keith Hamilton's Layman's Guide to the Pyramid of Amenemhotep, where he presents another exceptional 3D recreation of the Lost Pyramid with some of my on-site expedition evidence from 2 research investigations of this site. Starting here with the Google Maps image showing the Lost Pyramid adjacent to this massive quarry pit. And Hamilton states here, we will now turn our attention to the new pyramid discovered in 2017. Discovered during quarrying activities, the above satellite image highlights its precarious hold at the edge of the quarry. Announced to the press in April 2017, not much more has been released of the structure since. The clearest picture of the structure so far is courtesy of the documentary Egypt's Lost Pyramid. From this documentary and few images released by the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities, I will attempt a rough reconstruction of the substructure. And as I mentioned before, I will put a link to this original documentary, Egypt's Lost Pyramid, and Hamilton's guide in the video description below. So it appears that this quarry site was being utilized in both the modern and ancient times, and I will present some on-site evidence to support this conclusion. First, let's dive into Google Earth so you can see the terrain surrounding the Lost Pyramid. All right, here we go. Now, let's begin here at the Red Pyramid, looking north. And we will move south until we reach the Lost Pyramid and quarry site. So here you can see the Red Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid, and the Black Pyramids of Dahshur. And here we have the first quarry adjacent to the Lost Pyramid. And here you can see a massive mining pit operation. And we will explore this area just a little bit so you can see the depth and extent of this immense mining operation, where they are clearly excavating some sort of black material. And returning here to the mining pit adjacent to the Lost Pyramid. And here you can see the remains of the Lost Pyramid and a mud brick structure that is connected directly into the quarry pit through this channel. The first indication that these structures were intentionally built upon the precipice of a massive ancient mining operation. All right, now, up here, we have the site of the Lost Pyramid and the adjacent quarry. And just to the south, there is a massive mining operation where they are excavating the same black material that's found here. So I did some research on this mining company and discovered that these sites are operated by the Atfal al-Mustafa Quarry Company, the children of Mustafa Quarry. And you can see here and here that there is a rather unfortunate misspelling and mistranslation from Google, stating first Talfa instead of Atfal, meaning children. And here, the Mustafa Child Quarry. And I'll read both of these to you right now. Talfa al-Mustafa Quarry. Thank God the Talfa al-Mustafa Quarry was opened in Dahshur, the quarry of Sheikh el-Arab in the past, which needs no introduction, the finest types of Talfa. Again, a misspelling of the word Atfal, meaning children. Here, it says, from the Mustafa Child Quarry. Thank God the Mustafa Child Quarry was opened in Dahshur, the old Sheikh el-Arab Quarry, which needs no introduction, the best type of children. So clearly they are not excavating children from this quarry. But there is no website or data to confirm exactly what is being extracted from these pits. But I did find a few images from the company owner showing that they are definitely not quarrying stone from this site, but rather mining this black sandy material that you can see here being dumped into a truck and here being exported out of the site. Now, I have no direct way to confirm what this material is, but as soon as I saw the black material deep inside of this pit during my first expedition to the Lost Pyramid, it immediately reminded me of this: the Egyptian black sand, which I have discussed in several previous episodes, mainly the chemical analysis of the Red Pyramid staining, part 2, also linked in the video description below. So these black sand, heavy metal mineral deposits are mostly found on the Mediterranean coast of Egypt and contain valuable materials like ilmenite, garnet, rutile, and zircon. And these black sands are formed where mineral concentrate is left after wave reworking of highly mineralized sand dunes. So clearly, the beach coast is an ideal location for these deposits to form. But the same process may have been occurring in the very ancient past, where alluvial fluctuations of the Nile River flooding into this area near Dahshur may have also left these mineral concentrate deposits. And as previously explained, these black sand, heavy minerals, contain extremely valuable deposits of metal. As mentioned in this article, heavy minerals including monazite in Egypt's black sand deposits. Egypt's black sand deposits are located in the Nile Delta between Alexandria and Rosetta. They contain substantial reserves of heavy mineral sands, including ilmenite, magnetite, hematite, zircon, rutile, and monazite. And again here in this article, the Egyptian placer deposits, a potential source for nuclear raw materials, stating here, the mentioned deposits comprise huge reserves of the 6 heavy economic minerals, which include monazite, zircon, rutile, ilmenite, magnetite, and garnet. The first 3 economic minerals, namely monazite, zircon, and rutile, contain uranium, thorium, zirconium, hafnium, titanium, as well as rare earth elements. The beach rutile is almost pure titanium dioxide, assaying up to 98.64% of titanium dioxide. The monazite concentrate will be processed for the production of uranium, thorium, and rare earth oxide cakes, while zirconium, hafnium, uranium, and thorium oxides could be extracted from the zircon concentrate. So now, let's take an up-close look at the Lost Pyramid site itself. With this picture, taken from the center of the structure looking north toward the Red Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid, and the Black Pyramids of Dahshur. Here is a look into the site from the east during my first expedition, with the cavernous mining pit in the background. And again, another image from the east from my second visit to the site. Now, let's take a look at these step-like features. These things are tiny. They are barely long enough to step a full foot on, and they are incredibly shallow, maybe 2 to 3 inches high. These are not stairs for people to walk down. I descended down this passage, attempting to walk on them as if they were stairs, and it was an absolutely ridiculous undertaking. Not to mention that this entire passage would have been covered with stones, just like any other pyramid entrance, making it virtually impossible for anyone to effectively walk down these so-called stairs in a crouched position. So if they aren't stairs, what are they? My first impression is that they may have been a type of ratchet locking mechanism for the pump within the eastern descending shaft, ensuring that once the pump reached the bottom, it would remain locked in place at each step, ensuring that the internal pressure would never be released. However, upon further consideration and research, I am now more inclined to believe that this step system was for the production of turbulent flow and aeration or oxygenation of the fluid. As you can see here in this article, air-water flows down stepped chutes, turbulence and flow structure observations, stating here in the abstract, interactions between turbulent waters and atmosphere may lead to strong air-water mixing. This experimental study is focused on the flow down a staircase channel characterized by very strong flow, aeration, and turbulence. So these steps may have been designed to produce a highly aerated or oxygenated turbulent flow of liquid into the internal chamber system. Next, in this article here, stability of dissolution flutes under turbulent flow, stating here in the abstract, the dissolution of a solid surface under turbulent fluid flow can lead to the formation of periodic ripple-like structures with a wavelength dependent upon flow velocity. The importance of including not only the mean flow velocity, but also the turbulent component of the flow in the dissolution model is emphasized. The numerical experiments also compare dissolution profiles for gypsum and calcite. This ripple-like pattern is exactly what I discovered leading into the reaction chamber system at the Pyramid of Teti, as you can see again here. So there may be something to this concept of creating turbulent, aerated, or oxygenated flow into these pyramid chemical reaction chamber systems. More on this coming up soon. Now, let's take a look at this mud brick structure, maybe 20 meters to the north of the Lost Pyramid. And as I explored this area, I noticed that there is a channel leading directly into the enclosure and out the back, as you can see here. And this channel leads directly into the mining pit. I also discovered a remarkably similar component during a recent expedition to the Giza Plateau, where I found this channel connected directly into the huge quarry or mining pit to the southeast of the final pyramid. So now I'll put in a clip so you can see this first mud brick structure and channel for yourself.
Hell yeah. And I just found it. All right. So we were just over there. Again, black pyramid, red pyramid, bent pyramid. And look at this massive excavated area. I don't know if this was done during the modern time or what, but this is a huge pit. Absolutely immense, like a mining area. So you can see, I mean, I'm not going to even get close to the edge there because that is a huge drop off. But I just, haha, we're good. Tamim, tamim. Okay, so here we can see the remains of a mud brick structure, which this is going to date from the dynastic period. All right, so we're just going to take a look at something real quick here that I already find very interesting. Look at this channel. See the channel leading out toward the pit. Okay, and this has a very unusual curved configuration. Look at how it curves around like that. Okay, I would not be at all surprised if this was a smelting area. Holy shit. So it looks like there's a beginning of a channel here leading into this area. That channel then continues through this area here and out toward the pit. This is amazing. So I wonder if this was a furnace area or something of that nature. And again, I apologize to pause there. My mind is racing right now trying to figure this out. And again, Mina is over there looking very concerned. He's like, this is not the pyramid. All right. So again, you can see the very wavy configuration of the wall here. Certainly a bit unusual. And what I was trying to look at is the elevation of this conduit and channel, because the one that I showed at the central pyramid is tilted downward so that the material was flowing out away from the structure. And I think this one also does. It's on a slope angle heading down, so it wasn't going into the structure, it was going out of the structure. And whatever was flowing through this conduit would have flowed down in there. Look at that. It's a drainage pit. This goes down here into this massive area. Very, very interesting stuff. Again, more evidence for this ancient chemistry and metallurgy.
All right, now, moving on to this awesome 3D recreation of the Lost Pyramid developed by Keith Hamilton. Now, please keep in mind that the following is absolutely not a criticism of his work, as I highly respect Keith and his research. He had extremely limited data and footage upon which to base this model, and I just have the unique position of having personally visited and documented this site myself. So here we have the eastern descending shaft leading into this component here. And he shows that these two channels are completely parallel and suggests that they are for a sliding portcullis system. But as you can see here, these channels are not parallel. They curve to the outside. And I found evidence of mortar inside of these channels that is very reminiscent to the mortar found in the channels at the Pyramid of Sahure in Abu Sir, which are known to have housed copper pipes. So I do not think that these channels are a part of a sliding portcullis system, but rather these channels are housings for a pipe system that was once integrated within the structure. Now, here is another clip so you can see these curved channel housings and the entrance into the structure.
And we are now descending into the pressurization shaft. And I have described this as a pump shaft in the previous descriptions of the red and bent pyramid. And in those structures, it was a pump because it was pressing water in and out of the system, also bringing it up to pressure. But then the pressure was also released at some point during the reaction cycle. However, at this structure, it appears that once it was brought up to maximum pressure, that pressure was never intended to be released, as evidenced here by these locking mechanisms. And of course, these would be described as steps by conventional archaeology. However, I do not believe that to be the case, because if you look at the depth of these things, it's only a couple of inches. And this is not human-sized steps that are intended. So these are locking mechanisms. And as the pump or pressurization mechanism moved down this shaft, each one of these steps locked it further into place. So that pressure could never be released. And once that mechanism reached the bottom of the shaft, and let me turn around here, this structure was brought up to maximum pressure. Hence the immense granite beam that you see here, because this entire component would have experienced a tremendous amount of internal pressure. So they've got granite here and then granite here. And there are still many anomalies about this structure that I need to figure out. So we're crossing into the threshold of what would have been the internal chamber system. And you can see here another angled cut into the granite that leads back in this direction. And I can't determine exactly what was in that area. It certainly looks like a flow pattern here. And there was a bunch of trash in this area here. Also appears that there may be a hole down in this area. And none of this has been excavated. So now we're going to turn our attention to these channels, which are flowing down in this direction toward this area. And as I mentioned before, these channels could have been filled with a metal pipe or metal conduit of some sort. There is mortar in here. So there was something mortared into these channels. There's also a component that was in here. Impossible to say exactly what that component is. And again, now we're inside of the structure, the core of the structure. And again, you can see all of these metal joints that were holding these pieces together. So again, another indication of the tremendous amount of internal forces that were involved in the operation of these structures. Here's another joint here. And there was another component that would have sat right in here. And here you can see around the edges the mud brick. And it's impossible to tell what was originally sitting on top of this structure. But it could have been a mud brick pyramid that was cased in limestone. Here's another joint. And there would have been blocks on top of this because there's mortar here. So these are internal blocks that are locked together, and then more stones were stacked on top of it. All right, I just noticed this. So there's definitely some iron oxide here. Reddish brown iron oxide, which it would be hard to say if this was a part of the channel, but this could be part of a channel branching out here and then flowing into these channels. Let me pull back a little bit. So this part here branching out into this channel here and this channel here, which then lead down toward the opening of the structure.
All right, next. Here on the model, you can see that he has added the sliding portcullis block, which simply would not work given the curvature of these channels. They are not parallel as shown here. Next, on to the primary container, which he shows is made completely from red granite. But you can see here that the upper part of the container is actually 3 separate pieces. These first 2 are red granite, and this piece on the southern side of the container is made from red quartzite. And there is a very unusual hole here on the southwestern corner of the container. Here in the front, you can also see the raised northern piece of the lid, which is still sitting on several pieces of railroad ties. And here in the model, we now have the raised northern piece of the lid and the 2 parallel pits on either side of the container that connect into the container housing, which is accurate to the on-site structure. Now, looking into the container, you can see the lower red granite section, all of which was carved from a single piece of stone. The front part of the lid is still raised and sitting on these pieces of railroad ties. The middle red granite part of the lid is still in its original position. And here at the back, you can see the piece of red quartzite that forms the southern part of the container lid, as we just saw from the top. Next, Hamilton has added some of the upper portions of the pyramid, all of which are completely missing, with a chamber housing and A-frame ceiling above the primary container. And I think this may be a fairly accurate representation given the current condition of the site. And here, he has added an enclosed chamber in the middle of the structure that would have isolated and obscured the container housing. I somewhat disagree with this configuration, as I think that the two channels running alongside of the primary container are intended to be open and a functional component of the structure.
Here's another joint, and you'll notice the size of this one. So there must have been, again, a tremendous amount of internal forces in this area to justify locking this entire piece together. So this is a hole leading in here toward the primary chamber. Here's another huge joint that would have housed the metal lock. Here's another one, all leading over here to the primary chamber. And that hole continues through, and there's a cavity surrounding this chamber where that hole is leading. Again, here's a massive piece of quartzite that is the back side of the chamber. And we're going to go inside here in a second, and the top part is red granite or pink granite, these two big pieces here. The rest of the internal chamber is carved from what I believe to be one massive piece of quartzite, which the piece starts here, goes down into the ground, and then there's a container underneath these that are carved from, I believe, the same block. Here are some more joints here. Again, a tremendous amount of work went into making sure that this part is all locked together. And there's another hole here, and this does not appear to be for a post because it curves down into here, which I pointed out in the previous video. So over here, here's another one of these big metal joints. Okay, so there were two joints here. And what we saw over here is most likely damage. Okay, now I see it. I was wondering the shape. Okay. So this is all damage from where those two metal joints were popped out of here. So I thought it was maybe a horseshoe shape joint, but it's not. It was two separate joints that were damaged when they popped the metal out of here. So a lot of people ask, why is there so much destruction to these sites? Well, they were coming in here not only to harvest stones, but also to collect all this metal. There would have been a tremendous amount of valuable metal embedded in this structure that they wanted to harvest. Oh shit, here we go. So this is what you can't see on the other side. There's a pit here. Exactly. So this is the same component as the other side. I'm gonna get down in here. Yep. Boom. A pit. Another shaft that leads down into the area this footage when I get back to see exactly what we're looking at here. Pretty sure that goes all the way to the other side of the side reservoir. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Over here and you can see down in here, that's where the termination of the hole would be, right there. And I'm trying to wrap my head around the fluid dynamics and the directionality of the reaction, because those conduits could have been pumping material up that went in this direction, or it could be operating the opposite direction where water or a solution of some sort was filling here, flowing up, and then down this way. But that's going to require some additional investigation to determine exactly how this thing was working. So now I'm going to head down in here into the cavity. And let me go back here and see if I can determine where that shaft is leading, and I'm gonna have to look back at the video. Okay, so where the light is shining is where the internal container begins. Okay, I can see that now because the light over here is coming in from right there. So that's where it stops. Same configuration on the other side. All right, starting to put some pieces together here. And again, as I pointed out before, there are some tremendous acoustic properties inside of this chamber, and you may not be able to hear it quite yet, but I'm just on the threshold of the chamber, and of course my voice is propagating in this direction and echoing inside the chamber. But you'll see here in just a second when I get down in here. Bear with me. Okay. So now we're in the internal cavity of the chamber. These are the railroad ties that were used to lift up the top of this chamber. And you can probably already hear the echo. Ooh, ooh. And one thing I will point out, this is red quartzite here, which it's hard for me to tell if this is the same piece that's behind. It may be two separate pieces, but it looks to be. So this is probably, okay, this, okay, now I got it. This piece is part of the piece behind the structure. We're gonna circle back around there, and then this lower piece is a second huge piece of red quartzite that was carved out to carve this piece. And you'll notice that as soon as I plop down in here, the acoustics become absolutely tremendous. Ooh. Ooh. And I'm going to pause for a moment and wrap my head about this a little bit further, and I'll be right back. All right, everyone, as I just mentioned, if you want to help support the channel and get access to some exclusive research content, check out the Land of Chem members-only channel now with a new tier called The Alchemists, featuring a 3-part episode revealing the function of the Teotihuacan Pyramid Complex. Also, a completely unscripted, unedited Ask Me Anything video every single month, now on part 5. And ladies and gentlemen, I can finally announce a brand new series entitled The Land of Chem in the Lab that will feature a variety of experiments designed to test the hypotheses presented here on the Land of Chem channel. Links to everything in the video description below. Thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video. All right, everyone, that is it for today's video. This was episode 164, The Labyrinth of Hawara and the Lost Pyramid. I really hope you enjoyed today's video, and please remember to subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube if you're interested in the technology of a lost civilization utilizing physics and chemistry and the function of the Egyptian pyramids and other ancient structures from around the world. Click that little notification bell so you don't miss out on new episodes. Like, comment, share, and stay tuned. If you want to help support the channel and get access to exclusive research content, check out the Land of Chem members only channel and thelandofchem.com. If you want to pick up a copy of the book or grab some merch, links in the video description below. If you want to follow me on Instagram or on X, my handle is @thelandofchem. Also, don't forget, after you finish watching this video, please go subscribe to our 3 other channels. My wife Alexa's channel, Archeo Alchemy, our mutual international travel and culinary adventure channel, Let's Go with Lex and G, with a fantastic new episode coming up soon regarding the Ark of the Covenant in Japan. This is an episode you do not want to miss. And the best channel on YouTube, Egyptian Trash Cats. New episodes coming out very soon with our little Egyptian street cat family. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. I think that's it for today's episode, so I will see you next time. Yo, are you still watching this? Please subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube and click that little notification button. New videos coming out every single week. And check out this other episode. Come on, do it. Do it now.